Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
He said he gon' huff and puff and blow my mind up. You meet the island girl, she might dirty wine up.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank Jxxiii for the intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. My guest today is Coach Chuck Barnard. Coach Chuck is an author, speaker, and champions mindset mentor who's been in the education industry for more than 30 years. The founder of Success Institutes, he has a master's degree in special education, is certified in advanced behavioral modeling, is a master NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy practitioner. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So I like to always start off with just, when kids are younger, we have these aspirations of what we want to be when we grow up, and our parents might have different ideas for what we should be when we grow up. But being in the education industry, NLP, et cetera, that's not what we typically, when we're kids, strive for. So how did you fall into this, into what you're currently doing?
That's kind of a long story, so I'll kind of try to keep it short. But after graduating college, I went to the State University and majored in economics, and I was always kind of good at math and liked the economics, so I thought I might get into finance because I wanted to make money and
Sure.
typical kind of thing like that. But by the time my senior year of college rolled around and I really wasn't totally sure, I thought I might try to get into the Navy. Navy flight program specifically. So, I wasn't totally directed on where I'd go, but they offered some good opportunities with potential for paying for graduate school. But I didn't get into the Navy program. And the day I found out I wasn't accepted in that program, my mom had reserved a book for me at the library called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. And that was like his first major book. This is back in 1986. And I was like, wow, this is awesome stuff. I'd really kind of like to learn this, I think. So I was working, in the fall, just at a company in Maine, and said, all right, this spring, I'm going to go out to California and I'm going to try to meet Tony Robbins. So eventually I did. That summer of '87, I actually got certified in NLP and was like, oh, this is great. Oh, all kinds of people need to learn this stuff. So I thought I would try to run my own business and market to business people, salespeople. I did a lot of workshops with student athletes, and I loved doing those. Those weren't paying very well, but I loved doing them. So to make a long story short, over the next couple of years, I was trying desperately to make that business work, but I also had to work to try to pay the bills. And people kept telling me, you've got to get into education. And I loved working with the kids that I was working with, so I did. And I came from a family of educators. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my mom's brother, my sister. I mean, everybody seemed to be in education. And with that background, I ended up moving towards and finding positions working with kids who struggled in school, who just either severe behavioral and emotional problems that didn't allow them to be in a regular school, or eventually kind of an alternative program where I spent the last 18 years working with kids who just didn't fit in. In education realm, we say they had fixed mindsets. We want to move them to growth mindsets. So it just kind of evolved into that. And all along during those 30 years in education, working with those outlying populations, I was also doing some side things working with athletes. And that was, way back when I first started doing the NLP stuff. That was my first love. And those were most of the paying work that I got. But I never really, once I got into education, never really ran that as a business. It just, people kept hearing about me and things I did, and kind of did that on the side. got towards the end of my career, and I'm like, you know what, I need to go back to that original stuff and really work with these students on a much, more expanded base. I can do a lot more on my own, reach a lot more people than I can working for a school district. So
Sure.
so here I am.
Yeah, and just for, you've said NLP a couple times now, so just neuro-linguistic programming, just to define that for the audience.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so Chuck, you tend to work with, high school students and sometimes college students as well. Where does the role of, or maybe a better question, we're all under a ton of stress, and certainly, that population as well. How does stress affect, high school students, university students when it comes to, their academics, relationships, athletics, if they're, part of the athletic program, et cetera?
Yeah. So, all of us experience it, really, right? We understand that when we're under stress, we just don't really perform as well. But what people don't begin to realize is there's subtle levels of stress. Like, oh, I don't really feel that stressed out. But on the unconscious level, we're dealing with oftentimes these beliefs that we've created about what's possible, about things that we might want to accomplish and do. And when our model of the world isn't matching up with reality, that creates, and there is some fairly simple processes that you can guide people through to help break those barriers, those beliefs down. And that's one of the things that separates the work we do at Success Institutes, my company, then that doesn't really happen in a lot of other coaching type environments, is helping people identify those beliefs and the negative emotions they're holding on to, kind of at the unconscious level, to show them ways to break them down. And once you do that, you kind of have an aha moment. I can give you a couple examples from actually, I'll give you an example from athletics and one from purely an academic realm. So I worked with a college student. This was way back when I really first got started, who for 2 years at a small Division III baseball school. Well, he was there for baseball, but he really had Division I talent. He probably could have played at the local bigger universities, small Division III school. And his coach was a little bit frustrated. He was a little frustrated because he wasn't living up to his promise. So the coach got in touch with me, and in the work I did with Mark, he found out that he had this belief that he wasn't really good enough coming from a small rural town to compete with guys away. That was formed way back at a young age. Nothing, it just was one of those things that the way he interpreted stuff, he just wasn't ever going to be good enough. So he wasn't, because that little belief was back there. He wasn't really aware of it. But once we broke that down and took that away, a few other things that we put in place too, some positive beliefs, and then some habits about managing stress, about habits about managing those emotions. He didn't lose another game over his last 2 years of college. It went on, and he actually got to play professionally for 3 years. And that was coming out of a small Division III school.
That's pretty good, because that's not easy. That's not easy. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, and it, it really was about those two things: getting those beliefs out, and then showing him how to manage the anxiety that may come before a big game, right? That sort of thing. And that student who math is a common kind of issue with a lot of people, right? They just, I'm not good at it. I can't do math, blah, blah, blah. And this student we had for a couple of years. And over that time, we were constantly trying to interrupt that belief, right? In a public school setting, I didn't have all the tools I have available to me in a private setting. Just there's some interesting things with, if you aren't like licensed in social work, there's limited things that you can do, even though I have this background in advanced behavioral modeling and NLP and timeline therapy. So anyways, he scored in the bottom 10th percentile for his age group in math. And it was really in large part associated to these beliefs and the stress that he felt about going to math class. But when we finally broke those down and got some shifts in the 8th grade year, he 2 grade levels in 1 year, and he went from the 10th percentile to the 50th percentile in math in 1 year. And that was really about the beliefs and then the habits again, right? So, I could go on and on. There's just all kinds of data too about what stress does to people's ability to perform in the classroom or on the field, and showing them how to build habits and routine. I call it applying heat. This is habit, emotion, attitude training. So we try to train these habits where they can manage their emotions and their attitude.
Yeah, that's a pretty good acronym you developed there. HEAT. It's easy to remember. Chuck, you were telling me you have a 5-stage process to help students and their families to master, their mindset. Could you describe what those are?
Yeah. So again, the first and most important step that kind of permeates all those is you have to take responsibility for where you are. You've got to finally recognize that I'm here and I really want to be over there. It doesn't matter how you got here. Sometimes things happen to you totally out of your control. Well, that still doesn't matter. You're here and you need to get there. It takes you taking responsibility. Yeah, but we need to get the person there. And oftentimes with teenagers, that requires the help of parents, right? So the parents also got to kind of own that and say, yes, I'm going to do what I can to help my child get from here and have them take responsibility for getting there. So that's the kind of stage you go through. The second one is this idea of cleaning up the past. And this is what's ignored a lot, is we got to look in and try to find what are those beliefs that got developed typically at a very young age. What are those negative emotions we still might be holding on to, kind of lurking at that unconscious level? We got to discover them and then eliminate them and reframe them. The third step is this idea of building those habits, emotion, attitude training, right? So now we're really beginning to try to help create those habits and build those positive supports about building that mindset, right?
Sure,
So the
yeah.
first couple steps are kind of clearing the ground and getting ready to build the mindsets. And then habit, emotion, attitude training is beginning that process. Step 4 is getting and utilizing the power of synergy. So that is getting the parents primarily in a family situation on board, but even peer groups, right? So as we work with people, we have a community platform online where people can share problems, challenges, issues. I connect with them. But this is the idea that we are much greater than the sum of our parts, right? So as we move forward, we need people to help share ideas and hold us accountable. And then lastly is actually creating those rituals, right? So it kind of ties in with that beginning the process of applying heat. So you get those rituals established, and that you're now doing those on a regular basis to help move forward. You're going forward into life with the tools now available to constantly work on getting better. So, I emphasize all the time that this is a process. You're never done with it, right? This past year for me, I have really had to apply those. It was a very challenging year. I lost my wife to cancer last
Oh my gosh,
July.
I'm so sorry to hear that. My condolences.
So obviously, we were married for 28 years, together for 30. So, life happens to us, and when you have these rituals in place, that can become your go-to to try to navigate those storms that come up. They all, unfortunately, I can't tell everybody life's going to be easy, right? So in place, so when life does get hard, the storms come up, we can sail through them without the ship sinking.
Yeah, and Chuck, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable for sure. And I think that's a good segue to the next question I wanted to ask you, because you typically work with high school and college students, but I truly believe that some of the habits we build at even a younger age, we implement them, and of course that's involves the community and the parents, and instill them early. Then that serves us for the rest of our life. And I think that's what you're saying here. So maybe you could talk to that a bit.
Yeah, so you broke up a little bit, but I think you're just kind of asking about how these carry through life. Is that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, it's going from high school to college is one of those great change moments, right? We have different stages in life, and it's not just the kids, the parents go through it too, right? As the kids leave the home. And it's really challenging. I can't tell everybody that it's easy that these kids are going to maintain those habits through college. There's a lot of different pressures, but without them, so some of the numbers are over 60%, and this was an NCAA study. College students experience in a year's time anxiety enough that it impacted their academic performance. That's a pretty high percentage. And I can almost guarantee you from the own experience of my own kids who are now going, my young son is going into the last year of his college life, it's for them to fall back to and go back to, even if they kind of get derailed a little bit, are vital. And any help that we parents can give, like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Helps get them back on board. But my son played a couple of years of college baseball at a school that he was really, everybody was said, you can't play there. The talent's too good. But he did. And in the end, it was one of the top 10 D3 schools when he first joined the team. They were ranked in the preseason in the top 10 in the country. And he did not fit their prototype player. Right? He wasn't big enough, strong enough, fast enough, but yet he played. And a lot of that was he had those foundational components to fall onto to build that mental toughness and raise kind of above that level. And then when his mom passed away, that obviously really impacted him. And he also got cut that fall after she passed away. And he wrote a post that I share on my Facebook. I just saw it when he posted it, and it was like, wow, that is what we're talking about, where I'd given him that foundation, so that is like, all right, 2023, it's a new year, let's bring it on. I'm going to make it a great year. And that attitude was able to come through because of the work we'd done for years prior to that, right? So that's the sort of thing that we hope I think every parent, right? That every parent, they want their kid
For
to
sure,
be able
absolutely.
to believe in themselves, to have that kind of self-confidence. Another factor that happens with all this is they become more dynamic, natural leaders. People see that a little bit, so they kind of gravitate towards them. And being a master of your emotions, so that when bad things happen, you've got enough training that you can go, oh, I need this, and move forward. And that's that life, those are those life lessons. He's going to be able to take that and move on. And I've seen that with other students and athletes over the 30 years, right?
Yeah.
When we help give them those foundational skills, they come back to them. There's a number of case studies I have that I could talk about besides my sons, but that's
Chuck, I find it interesting. You put that stat a few minutes ago about 60% of kids, and they're so stressed that it affects their performance. And it's very ironic. It's very very similar to studies done in the workplace by different organizations. People in the workplace that are so stressed that it's affecting their performance. So it's actually a little bit higher. So it's one could infer that things get worse as we get older, or we get more stressed as we get mortgages and this, that, and the other thing, which I think is a good segue. I want to ask you a question. So obviously this is not a podcast about health, but that is my background. So I always like to ask my guests, what does your morning routine or health routine look like for you on a typical day?
I have a morning ritual and an evening ritual. My morning ritual is long. I started getting up at 4:30 in the morning because I included a workout in that morning ritual instead of trying to do it at the end of the day. But essentially, I have a couple core things in that outside of the exercise, which I think is important, even if it's just a short walk, anything kind of get going. But it's breath work, and for me, it's a prayer meditation kind of thing. But the breathing it's hard to put into words what it does as being able to help calm you. It's really the quickest way to begin changing physiology. Changing your physiology is the quickest way to change your state. So there's a number of different breath patterns and practices that you can do. I like using box breathing because it helps me control the intake, the hold, exhale. There's a hold at the bottom. I get more control of it, and I've noticed that my breathing patterns have slowed down over the times that I've done this. So besides the physiological benefits, mentally, it just, we've all experienced it, right? What do we do when we get really nervous? We have to go speak in front of a group or something like that. We do we sigh. And that breath work and training and practice can help you manage your emotions real quickly. Those moments when you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off or something, and you feel that that becomes instinctual almost. So that's probably one of my more go-to practices. And then I couple that with a prayer. I call it more than just prayer. As a religious person, there's that idea that when I'm praying, I'm talking to God, which is true. I don't want to discount that, but there is this idea of being in a state where you are more open to hearing God kind of communicating with you, or it's like the intuition, right? You that intuitiveness, you kind of open up, and that's state related. So that prayer / meditation is also really powerful.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you brought up breathing. I think more people need to learn how to breathe properly, and again, I share that with my clients and students as well. As easiest way to calm yourself down, control your automatic nervous system is take a couple nice breaths. And again, yeah, like you said, there's a million ways to breathe, and they all serve different purposes sometimes. But that's awesome. What would you, if you could go back, let's put a health angle on it, or a health bent on it. If you had to go back and talk to your 20-year-old self or some earlier version of yourself, what advice would you give yourself in regards to health?
Probably what we just talked about is the that meditative prayer, calm myself down. I was an athlete and pretty competitive. I've been known to be highly competitive with people playing, whether it's playing Monopoly or a sport. And when I was younger, I let that kind of get to me too much. I developed, it was, the doctors had said it was called neurodermatitis, and it was a rash I would get. And it was stress related. When I felt that anxiety and tenseness, I would start scratching and itching. If I had learned these techniques at an earlier age, I think I would have done better athletically than I did. And unquestionably, some of the I was a healthy person, right? But when you get into college and even just after, part of it's age, no question about that. But you don't necessarily live as healthy of a lifestyle as you should. I was able to avoid a lot of the drug and pressures that was around back in the 80s and early 90s. But alcohol was certainly a part of the college life and all. And I don't know how much that would have. Well, I'm convinced that if I had this background, this training, some of that would have changed. I was a social guy. I would have been out, but some of the binge drinking that happens in college, I am convinced I would not have been as involved in, as I put it that way. So
yeah. So yes. So sorry. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. No. So and then going on after college, where that began to change, anyways. If I knew then what I knew now and actually had applied it, I think there are a number of times and situations things would have been handled much differently, in a much more healthy way, relationship wise, and just mentally. If I knew then what I know now and applied it. It's not just
exactly. It's the plan, and I think we all realize that, and as we get more wiser and older, recognize these things. And I just, you didn't say this exactly, Chuck, but I want to underline for the audience is like, some of these techniques that you might be using yourself or that you want to learn, i.e. breath work or meditation, is like, hey, it's never too early to start applying these things to your kids. I've tried to, as much as they resist, I try and apply, or not apply, teach my kids how to do breath work to calm themselves down when they have, their stressors that, we as adults think is like, what are you crying about? That's no big deal. But, to them, it means something, right? To help them cope with those things. So I think that maybe that's an underlying message for the audience. Chuck, you have a free gift for the listeners. It's a free webinar, and it's at coachbernard360.com is where that can be found. We'll put the link in the description. But can you just give a really brief what's the webinar about?
Yeah. So there's actually a couple different options that I have available, but for parents, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to need to kind of begin to help the child. There is a webinar, and I actually linked to a training platform on our site, so you don't need to listen to like the whole hour and a half. I have it broke up into chunks, but it's on how you can structure your own language to be a little more persuasive and help your child embed suggestions, interrupt some negative patterns of thinking. It's how you can begin to practice using your own language to influence your child. And it's techniques that I've used in public school settings for years. And it's all about shaping. It's not necessarily about direct change, but influencing. And it's pretty powerful.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out myself because as much as I'm pretty aware about language and the words we use and what the meaning is, like we all can be better. So I'm going to be checking that out myself, folks, as well. Chuck, it's been a fantastic conversation. Any last words of wisdom or golden nuggets for the audience before we wrap it up today?
I guess the only words of wisdom that I have is we all intuitively understand how important our mindset is. Like we know that really ultimately it's not always what we know, but it's how we present ourselves, it's how we carry ourselves, it's all those things that really ultimately make the difference in our lives. And those things are a factor of our mindset. So for all of us, I work with kids and their families primarily, but every one of us can use that kind of wisdom to understand that our mindset's something we need to train regularly, and it's a process. I like to think I'm a lot better off now than I was 30 years ago, and that's something too many people, I think, tend to forget or don't think about in their development until they get into the professional career. It's like, oh man, let's teach kids this, right? So
there's a lot of things. Yeah, I love that, Chuck. There's a lot of things that we as adults work on ourselves, though. Yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt if we started teaching these to our own kids, or in the school system a lot earlier. So wholeheartedly agree with you there. So Chuck, appreciate you being on the show today. It's fun, and hearing your story and some of the examples you provide, that was really awesome. So again, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to throw it back to Jxxiii to guide us out with some music. Again, thanks for listening to the Deepak Saini Show. Exceptional results for the exceptional you. Until next time.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company,